can give you a pebble, and you would look at it and you would not think much of it.
Yeah.
But when I tell you that that pebble actually came from the moon, and it came on a spaceship with a Saudi astronaut who brought it, it gives a whole different value to that pebble.
Did they bring one back?
I don't know, but I'm just making it's a metaphorical story. A lot of people focus on what they do. Some of them focus on how they do it, but very few focus on why they do it. Most people I've ever met in my life don't have a why statement.
Would you label or categorize yourself as a disruptor?
Yes, absolutely. You can tell me what I can and can't do, but you can't tell me what I can and can't be. And it was very early on in my career that anytime I try to pitch anything to anyone, they don't believe it, they don't like it, for whatever reason. So I've learned how to really work on my craft. If you manage to have discipline and love what you hate, you can only imagine what you would do when you're doing what you love. If we allow ourselves to stop being too stubborn for a minute, it's always better for us. Because there are higher powers that know what's best for us even when we don't know what's best for ourselves.
I was watching a movie yesterday with my wife, and the guy said, I always felt that I was a little more than. What would you say to someone who really thinks that they will never amount to anything?
People will believe you when you can build it.
KAUST is world class. I don't think it gets the recognition. Well, in the GCC probably does. People know what King Abdullah University for Science and Technology is, but on a global level, is it known? Like, do people know?
It is very well known in the academic world. Very well known because they publish a lot of good papers. They go and attend academically. They're doing very, very well.
At an altitude of 37,000 feet, we soar, with a rich legacy of honoring our guests, and a unique style that has resonated with the world for 78 years. We carry the name of our country on every journey and across every sky. We are Saudi. We welcome you in our own way. We shape our present and build our future. Saudia, our name and country, our style and approach, striving for excellence in everything we do. This is how we fly.
How many students?
I don't know the latest statistics. Has been I left in February 2018.
Okay.
And I don't know any of the latest statistics.
But busy and buzzing, right?
Yeah. They're busy.
Okay.
They're busy. They keep busy. Have people coming in and out, and they still call me and ask me to come in to give in workshops and training. And
how lovely.
Yeah. So we have a good relationship with each other.
Fantastic.
The day I resigned, I registered as a vendor, and they started calling me, and we started doing work. I did work with Abdurrahman Jafri when he was at KAUST after I left, giving a couple of workshops on design thinking, prototyping, human-centered design, all of these amazing things we did together. Yeah. Storytelling, how to pitch using storytelling. Yeah. All of these great things.
Taqaddum is what he was heading?
He was, yeah.
Which is
even before that.
All right.
We did it even with companies who want to do incubators and accelerators. We did it for a couple of defense companies, a couple of local companies. We did a lot of good things.
But some magic happens there.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful campus. Whenever I drive to Cake and I see it, I've never been into KAUST, but as I drive past it, I was like, I'd like to one day visit it. I know there's a golf course there.
Yeah.
The buildings are gorgeous. Sits on the water. I mean, if you didn't know, you'd probably think it's like a 5-star resort of some sorts.
It's a very nice place.
Yeah. Well, maybe one day, if they'll let you back in, you can maybe take me.
Sure.
You can take me.
Sure, no
well, you, sir, are super impressive in your own right. I'll give a quick intro to people just so they can know a little bit more about what you do. You are the co-founder and chief technology officer at HealTech, which after a bit of research, I was really, really impressed that we have such a facility in Saudi. You oversee the manufacturing of prosthetics and orthotics. Am I pronouncing it right?
Correct.
Using digital manufacturing techniques with over 22 years of experience. How old are you? And expertise in reverse engineering, machine design, CNC machining, 3D modeling, 3D printing, has been an instrumental in advancing the field of medical prosthetics and orthotics. You hold a PhD in plastic processing from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, where you also earned a master's degree in project management. You hold a master's and bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering from Iowa State University. Is there anything that you haven't done till now?
You haven't taken over the world yet.
Give it time. Give it time. A friend of mine lost his leg in a propeller accident, episode 17, Jake Burry. He was moved to Aramco, I think, in 2004. He's going up to 20 years in Saudi. Jumped off a boat, a Leith, 4 hours offshore. Sorry, Jake, for saying the story again, but I know you don't mind, which is why I'm sharing it. The current or the propeller sucked him in. He lost his leg, poor guy. Very strong guy, good head on his shoulders. Like, it takes quite a personality for someone to really stay with it at a time when you're going through such trauma in every sense of the word. Lost his leg, lost so much blood. They had 4 hours to get back to the hospital of Leith, which is not an advanced hospital in any way, shape or form, but they did what they had to do, and then they shipped him to a takhasusi here in Jeddah, and he woke up and the doctor gave him the news. He looked down and he saw his entire left leg was gone, and today he's on a prosthetic leg, and he says that he lives life better than he has ever done prior to the accident. He found a new life, and I don't think he would have said it without the tech of prosthetics. So what you do is something that I really admire.
Thank you very much. And there is also another company that I've started almost 13 and a half years ago called Dartech Engineering. And what we do over there is we contribute to the localization of obsolescence mechanical spare parts for the industrial sector and for large U.S. companies. And we even started working with international companies who solicit our services to serve the Saudi clients. So it's been a long journey that started back in 2011 after I came back from the U.S.
You were probably one of the first companies in Saudi to do, like, I'm just going back to my intro, 3D printing, 3D modeling, and maybe you can tell me what CNC machining is.
Sure.
But you must have been a pioneer as far as Saudi companies are concerned.
I was the first reverse engineering company
in
Saudi, and I'm the first prosthetic company in Saudi that does local manufacturing of prosthetic limbs. There are a couple of companies who do orthotics. Orthotics basically are like support. It's not the prosthetic limb, but it's like the cast, the splints, the insoles. These are called orthotics.
So if you're flat-footed, would you...
Orthotics.
You okay.
Prosthetics is called for limbs, either upper or lower limbs. When you lose out an arm, you lose a leg, that's prosthetics.
Got it. And this is something that people would most likely would have had to leave Saudi to go and try on these prosthetic limbs, but you having something manufactured so close to home, people can get it on a local level now.
Actually, what the kingdom did is that they've been offering this service in the kingdom. So we have people who are certified prosthesis and orthosis specialists, but the parts are not manufactured locally. They're all imported 100%. So that's where we found the gap in the market, is that how can we localize it in the kingdom in order for us to find the local needs? I'll just give you one simple example. One thing that the West will never find as a problem for people who lost prosthetic limbs in the Gulf regions or in the Arab regions or the MENA region is that how do we deal with people who are trying to pray and want to prostrate? Because the knees, anyone who has an above knee amputation, the knee only goes to 90 degrees. That means you're not going to be comfortable. The way around it is to find something called a rotational adapter. So basically, when you prostrate, you can move it out of the way, but it looks funny.
Yeah.
So I wanted to do something a little different. So I was actually just in Leipzig, Germany, 2 months ago attending the OT World, the largest prosthetics and orthotics exhibition in Europe that happens every 2 years. And I found a prosthetic knee that bends 180 degrees. And I told them that's what I want.
Which is what normal knees go. They go to 180?
They go all the way back because you can hold your leg and pull it all the way to your back. That's what normal knees do. So when I met this company and I met the designer, we spent about an hour and a half talking, and I told them this is what the kingdom needs. So what we were going to do is we were going to first supply it and make sure the customers like it, and then we slowly bring in manufacturing to the kingdom through a phase-based approach. Okay. So this is how you really build a knowledge-based economy. Mm-hmm. You take what's existing, don't reinvent the wheel, learn from it, modify it, optimize it, develop it, and then innovate. Mm-hmm. Innovation is something that you need to earn. It's not something you buy. It's not something you plug. Because if you try to copy innovation, it will fail because it needs a certain mindset that you need to build towards, not something that you buy. Because when things go wrong, and they will go wrong, if you haven't built that organic process, it will fail. Mm-hmm. And I'm speaking from experience.
Yeah. That's the beautiful thing about science is that you never really start from zero. You start from where the best have ended.
You always start where people left off. That's what Toyota did. That's what the country of Singapore did. That's what Korea did. That's what China did. And we have to learn from the best. Because if you think about it, Toyota is really a Frankenstein of 3 U.S. cars: Chrysler, GM, and Ford. They took it, broke it apart, understood how the parts work together, and then they Frankenstein their A1 model. That's how the first Toyota was made. Because Toyota used to be a loom machine. They used to do sewing machine.
Sewing machine?
Loom. That's what they used to do. So they decided to innovate. So the way to do it is that you see where people left off and then you create your own. Was the A1 model a complete success? Absolutely not. But they went through the process of continuous improvement. Because there are 2 ways to approach a problem.
Kaizen. Yeah.
Either perfection or continuous improvement.
Just Kaizen?
Yep. Continuous improvement is how you become better than you were yesterday. Perfection is something that you're taught to do in school, but it's not how the world works. Because if you think about it, perfection is never attained. So if you're trying to seek something like a vision that is never attained, so you get into this process of trying to perfect it and could miss a deadline or miss the punchline.
Yeah.
So when you do it and put it out there and get feedback and you have a continuous improvement feedback loop, you will always improve and become better. And this is something, unfortunately, is not what we're taught in schools. Schools, in order for you to advance from one level to the other, you need to make less mistakes. I have never met anyone in my life who makes any advancements in their lives unless they make mistakes. So it's almost counterintuitive. So when you do that for 12 years and you're trained not to make mistakes and you're asked to innovate, they're almost asking you to do something you were never trained to do.
It's rubber and glue.
Yep. And by the way, this is an educational problem globally. It's not just in Saudi. So this is where the challenge of how to implement innovation into organizations is currently, that's where the learning process is happening.
And too much memorization in the schooling system.
Yes.
Memorizing isn't a sign of you understanding it.
No.
Explaining things is a sign that you can understand a topic. I wonder if in school, if they're still teaching kids, the times table.
It definitely got better than my days. It definitely got better.
I'm 83. What are you?
I am 79.
You don't look 4 years older than me at all. But you remember, we'd have to stand in front of class and 5 ضرب 5 25 6 ضرب 6.
I used to do that.
I mean, further down my notes, I wanted to ask you, but since we're on the topic now, is not what do you think of the schooling system, but what do you think we can do to improve? What ideas do you have for the schooling system to improve? We all know that it's dated and it's one of the oldest systems that is yet to change, where you've got 10, 12, 15, 20 kids to one person on the top who's speaking. I don't know, but I feel like there's a better way for us to go about teaching our kids for what's to come. the 20 subjects or 25 subjects available to you up until the age of 18, I think it's too many. I wish they would concentrate and bring that number down so that you can focus on something that you are good at. There's a saying, if your kid sucks at math, but my God, he can hit a tennis ball, get him a tennis coach. Double down on your strengths, right?
The tricky part is most kids don't know their strength yet, especially when they're adolescents and young and trying to. For me, I didn't even want to go to school. I wanted to drop out of school. I didn't want to go to college. I didn't want to study because my grades always sucked.
Really?
I was a horrible student. I was a very, very bad student.
I did not foresee this part coming.
I didn't know it at the time. I only knew it when I was about to take my PhD qualifier exam, and I flunked the first time. And my advisor knew that I know my stuff, but he didn't know why I did so horribly on the test. So he asked me to go and get a psychiatric evaluation. We found out that I have ADD, ADHD, I'm dyslexic, and I have mild OCD, and I have learning difficulty. So I had all that, and I had no idea.
Goodness.
I was not diagnosed. So when I did it, and they gave me what they call a visa to take extra time in the exam, that's when I passed, and I barely passed, because I'm horrible taking tests and exams. And if I will take you back, when I first started college, I went through an evaluation process, because when I started my schooling in the U.S. at Iowa State University in Ames, Iowa, I went even before there were any scholarships. That's how old and back I started. My parents paid for my education when I first started, and I felt guilty because I intellectually wasn't very smart, because everybody labeled me as intellectually inferior. My grades were bad, I couldn't memorize, and I was labeled, and I believed it. So I said, you know what, my dad is a scientist. He's an organic chemistry professor. Mm-hmm. My mom is a professor. So the only way I can convince them that they should not pay for my education and I should come back to Saudi is that I go and get a medical report to prove to them that I'm mentally retarded. That's how I was thinking at the time. I was only 19 years old. I was young, dumb and ugly. So, and when I went to the doctor,
it's a lot to have to deal with, by the way. And not the dumb and ugly part, but to believe that you are less than, doesn't do anything for your confidence in yourself.
No, I had zero confidence in myself, zero confidence. But I did it anyways. And what happened is when I went to the doctor, I said, I want you to do a full checkup on me, and I want to do an MRI and fMRI, so functional magnetic resonance imaging, to prove to my parents that I am mentally incapable of studying here, so I can prove to them so I can go back instead of them wasting their money in my education, and money's better spent elsewhere. So the doctor was very, you know how old people are just mature and wise? They entertain you. Yeah. And then they play along and then hit you with the punchline when the time is right. So when I went for the evaluation, I told him, I was like, Doc, how bad is it? He's like, well, I have some good news and I have some bad news. He said, the bad news is that you're different. I said, well, I know that. So where's the good news? He said, well, there's nothing really wrong with you. It's just you look at the world really differently. I said, well, can you elaborate? He said, imagine if you're sitting in a living room and you have a pane of glass. He said, most people see one image, the backyard, the outside world. He says, you see it as separate squares and rectangles and triangles, not connected. So what you do is you spend a lot of energy trying to paint a picture, and 6 or 8 pictures come out. That's why you don't have enough time to finish exams, because you're trying to connect the dots and you don't see it. And then when I walked out of there,
problem solving, right? It's a different way of
a different way of looking at the world. It's just different, and it's not the standard. So when you're not standard, you are an outlier. And an outlier is labeled as incompetent or weird or different or something else. So when I walked out of there, that's when I decided I'm not going to believe what anyone labels me at. I was young. I was 18, 19. I was very, very young. And it was that moment that I started excelling. And when I graduated my bachelor's degree, I graduated with honors and distinctions. I could not even believe it. My dad did not even believe
What a
it.
turnaround.
It was a very different because of the way I thought about myself, how I saw myself. And I was very young. I mean, I graduated with my bachelor's. I was only 22.
This was 3 years after you didn't have much confidence in your abilities.
Absolutely, yeah. It took 3 years for me
You
to...
then graduated honors
And distinction.
and distinction, top of class,
Yes.
valedictorian.
Not valedictorian, but second.
Distinction, that's
Yeah, honors
pretty
and distinction.
effing impressive.
Top 10, let's just put it
That's
that way.
amazing.
Yeah.
In Iowa State
In
University,
Iowa State University.
which is a very good school.
Yes, one of the top 50 when I was at there back in the early 2000s.
So what was what turned? Like, what was a turnaround that changed everything pointing upwards?
It's just how I saw myself and how I stopped believing in people.
Huh.
Because the people, all my life, I felt like an outsider. All my life, I felt like I was castrated as different. And I believed it. But I believed it with all the negative baggage that comes along with it. But it was when I was like, I decided, no, I'm going to be, you can tell me what I can and can't do, but you can't tell me what I can and can't be.
الآن ليس الجديد الأفضل على الإطلاق، نكهة قوية، كرمشة مثالية.
And I'm going to show you what I want to do. So, and I'm very stubborn. So it built into my character. And it was very early on in my career that anytime I try to pitch anything to anyone, they don't believe it, they don't like it, for whatever reason. So I've learned how to really work on my craft, how to hone my craft. And when I figured out and discovered machine design using software, how to design things, I felt that that's my calling. And I excelled. I spent days and hours and nights. And it wasn't until my mid-40s that I realized that I started training when I was 6 years old and I didn't even know it. That's why it clicked when it happened in my early 20s. Mm-hmm. Because when I was little, it was back in the 80s, and I had my access to action figures were limited. And I loved my action figures. The He-Man, the Thundercats, the Ghostbusters.
Ninja Turtles came in as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, later on.
I loved all of these characters, but I didn't have access to action figures. So what I did is I created my own, but I don't know how to draw. I don't know how to design. I've never been schooled. I'm only 6 years old. So what I did was I took parchment paper from my mom in the kitchen, and I started copying all of these magazines that I had. And I used to take it, and then I carbon copy it to actual paper. It started with newspapers, and I started creating characters. Bionic 6. I created all these characters, but these characters needed their headquarter base, they needed their house, they needed their car, so I had to build it. And when I started building houses, they started leaning, so I need to put columns. Well, how do I space them? What is the distance? What is the right distance? Do I thumb it, or do I calculate it? So I tried trial and error, so I created my own city.
Did anyone own city? This is insane.
And I took it a step further, because I was in the university housing, in King Abdulaziz University housing. So I started going to my neighbors and asking them what kind of characters they want. So I started creating it, and I used to sell it to them. And it was crap. It was really crap. It wasn't like something amazing.
But you were 6.
But I was 7 years old.
You're doing 99.999% more than any of the other 6-year-olds. Did anyone take note of your ability?
Except my mother. She's the one who noticed it and supported it.
God bless her.
I would ask her for colors, and she was like, as long as you're not burning the house, I'll get you whatever you want. It was always a negotiation, and that's the only way my mom can get me creatively busy without burning the house down. Because I was such a hyperactive child. I was always getting into trouble all the time. Because I was super curious. I was just too curious for my own good that I got into a lot of trouble. in school and at home. So what ended up happening is that my mom would always support this activity. She would buy me whatever I want. She noticed that my dad was the dean, so he was always busy, so he didn't have time. So it's how it built, and it started with newspaper, then it started with clear paper, and it just got better with time. At the time, I didn't know that I was training. All I wanted to do was play and sell because it sounded like fun as a child. And it went all the way. So when machine design came along, it just clicked. But I didn't connect it until I was in my mid-40s that I was actually training to become a machine designer, which affects what I do today, till this day. And I'm one of the very few machine designers in Saudi who can actually design in 3 dimensions and imagine in 3 dimensions and optimize in 3 dimensions and make things better, where I'm sought out to do this thing that I started training when I was 6 years old.
That's some full circle stuff right there. My question for you, Hashim, is with all the creative efforts and achievements that you had from a young age, you doing what you're doing, I don't imagine that the creativity stopped then. How is it that you didn't have confidence in yourself by the age of 18, 19 when you went into university? How did you not feel that, that you're him, you are that guy that is way past your peers?
When you hear too many people castrating judgments towards you, and it happens over and over again from multiple people, you start believing it. And when you believe what people think of you because of how they see the world, it gets to your head.
So that was a problem.
That was a problem. And it happens all the time, by the way. Even in my mid-30s when I started my company, I had moments when senior people at companies told me your idea of a project or the business is complete bogus and you need to shut down. So I kept hearing it a lot and I lost confidence in myself. So it happens. It's not something that only happens in your teens. It even happens into adulthood. Because when you hear it when it comes from an authority figure and you hear it over and over, sometimes you double think and sometimes you think maybe they're right and I'm wrong.
Right.
So you lose confidence every once in a while. That's why you need to have a support team that reminds you of who you are. Sometimes these people are imaginary. Sometimes they're actual people in your life. Sometimes they're fantasy people. Sometimes they're their future version of yourself that comes into your subconscious mind and beats the living daylights out of you and shows you like, no, you show them. You don't believe it, show them.
Yeah. So you're living proof to many people who are wrong about you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Made a lot of people eat their words.
In a very classy way.
What keeps you going? Like, if you already feel that, do you feel that you have more to give, or are you satisfied with what you have built so far?
I am absolutely not satisfied with what I have. I don't feel that I've even scratched the surface with everything that I did. I don't think we've even scratched the surface. The vision of what I can do, my team and I can do, we haven't scratched the surface. We're completely invisible. We are so layered into the supply chain and ecosystem of both industries that people don't know who we are, but we make things work. People call me when they're desperate. And when they're desperate, you want someone who can get the job done without a mistake. And that's where people call me and my team. And I made sure that I trained all of my guys and the ladies that I have. And I have an amazing team right now that I can count on. And so what I do right now is I'm like an orchestra conductor. I don't play an instrument. I just make sure that everyone plays their instrument. And when things are out of tune, I just go and help them, support them a little bit, then back off. I let them become independent because I trusted them, and they really they never let me down. I have an amazing team.
How long did it take for you to find out where you are most effective?
I went through 3 different phases. The first phase when I started the business, I started as a completely technical guy, and that was the biggest mistake you could ever do in business, is to approach business as a technical guy and with logic. That's the biggest mistake, and I failed. I failed miserably.
How should you approach it?
You should approach it as a businessman.
Numbers.
You look at numbers. You make your decisions based on financial projections, understanding how to read financial records, and understanding how to see trends, and how to forecast and how to make decisions based on financial information instead of gut engineering or technical information. And that was the second phase, and that's when we started succeeding in the company. And then the third phase, which I'm currently in, is I'm in the relationship business.
Okay.
I just build relationships, connect the dots, and make people happy by helping them find what they really need, by giving them the impression that they're getting what they want. Because sometimes people don't know what they need, because when they see a problem, they're explaining the symptom, not the cause. I help them find the cause and then satisfy both their wants and needs. And sometimes what their wants and needs are at odds with each other. So it takes a lot of negotiation and a lot of selling. And people need to believe who you are first before you can sell whatever it is that you're selling, whether it's a product or a service.
And before people can believe who you are, you need to believe and trust in who you are.
And that takes a whole lot of time.
Because it absolutely does. It's a journey and a half. Because a buyer or a potential partner can smell the bullshit from a mile away.
Yes.
And I speak from experience. There were years before I started this where I didn't have it and I tried to bluff my way through. No one was buying. You ain't him.
Well, what changed?
Finally doing something that I felt was impactful. If you're not passionate about something, you're only going to give it X amount. But when you're enjoying what you're doing and you're feeling your impact, to me, 2 weeks ago when they said, what are you doing for Hajj holiday? I said, when does it start? It's Thursday night right now, right? It's the weekend. People are at dinners, people are, at the beach, people are doing whatever they're doing. But technically I'm working. If we just look at what I'm doing, I'm working. This isn't work for me. And I managed to find a way to make work feel like play. And I think that's when you can really excel. If you can make work feel like play, I don't think many can keep up with you if you really enjoy what you're doing.
Because you end up competing with yourself. And when you do that, people have a hard time even competing with you. Because you become authentic.
You do.
Because that's when you really find your sweet spot.
You absolutely do.
And the more you do it, and the better you get at it.
جديد. اكسر الروتين مع أطباقنا الجديدة من بيتزا هات جدة. بيتزا هات جدة، ذوق طعم الثقة معنا.
I was watching a movie yesterday with my wife, and the guy said, I always felt that I was a little more than whatever I was doing. It was a little more than what I was doing. And that took a toll on me, because what I used to do, I thought that I was going to do that for the rest of my life. And I was a C- student. And there were days that I'd speak to myself and say, I wish I worked hard in school, so I'm not in this environment where it can't be the rest of my life. And alhamdulillah, like now I see the more than I thought for myself that I was. I see the proof in the pudding now. I'm like, this is what it was all along.
Okay.
And the people that know me very well, cousins, really close friends, they're like, this was your destiny. And it's great to get that confirmation from people who mean a lot to you, that want to see you succeed.
And one of the greatest things for me to see is for people, regardless of their background or whatever it is that they're doing, is to see them living up their full potential.
Yeah.
Even if they don't realize it, but they're on that path, because nothing breaks my heart like to see someone like just a cog in a machine, living day in and day out, just cashing a paycheck. What a waste of human potential. Nothing kills me than seeing someone. I use a lot of analogies because I'm an engineer. I call them leaking pipes.
Love that.
So they're basically replaceable.
Yeah.
Because they could leak, but easy to replace. But pumps, on the other hand, you give them something at a low value, they increase the value. But you need the pipes, because the pumps can't work alone. No. But if you have a power plant with only pipes and one pump, the pressure would build up and it will explode.
It's amazing how that's in human life as it is in engineering sense and plumbing.
Yes.
Unbelievable.
Because I see a lot, because I'm a designer by nature. I love to design stuff. So I see a lot of similarities between machine design and people, because machines are designed by people. So whether you are aware of it or not, you are putting a part of your humanity into your products, whether you realize it or not.
Yeah.
And the best products mimic reality.
Yeah.
They're more organic. They're more mimicking how things interact with each other in the real world.
Absolutely. Did you ever ask yourself why you entered the world of prosthetic manufacturing?
It happened by accident. I was actually just coming out of a project. I was meeting a client and I received a call by someone who I've met 4 years earlier. And he said, can you stop by? We're an investment company. We would like to talk to you. I said, sure, why not? I'm on the way. So I stopped by and talked to them. They said they wanted to start a company that does 3D printing service. I said, don't waste your time. You need to focus. You can't be the jack of all trade, master of none, because you are not going to capture any part of the market. You need to be really niche, because in business these days, you need to be really niche. When you start, focus on delivering. Don't confuse people. Keep it simple. Deliver that. And then as you grow that market and getting some cash flow and you become cash flow healthy, then you diverge. Then you come back and converge. And then you go through this sinusoidal wave. But you have to be very cautious about it.
Al-Baik did that.
And that's a very smart way to do it.
I think they had, 3 SKUs, 4 SKUs.
It's a smart way to do it.
Including beverages.
Yeah. I mean, that's the right way to do it. And then you learn as you go along and you let the numbers speak. And then what happened is that when I told them that, they said, well, where do you think we should focus, Dr. Hashim? I said, we'll focus on the medical field, because that's a part of the market that we feel is underserved. Because in Dartech, we used to get ad hoc requests from the medical field because we're good in 3D scanning, 3D modeling. We can scan people who have scoliosis. We can scan people who have flat feet. We can do that, but we did it on ad hoc basis. One of the stories that we have is that there was actually a soldier back when the war in Yemen started, and he had a bomb explode right next to him, completely shattered his face. Completely shattered. They had to put temporary plates just to hold his face up until he gets to the hospital, because completely disfigured him. So what the hospital called us through a company in Jeddah got in touch with us. They said, can you help us take the CT scans, computer tomography files, and create a 3D model so we can 3D print it and pre-cut the titanium plates to reduce their duration of the surgery, because the nature of his injury, his trauma, means that he's susceptible to infection. So we want to reduce the duration of the surgery as much as we can. We have never done anything like this before. But 2 years ago, we were playing with ideas, and this is where innovation comes in. And when sometimes you don't even know where you're heading, but if you have enough forecast to say, how can I take this idea and germinate it into something that could be wonderful? Just 2 or 3 years earlier, we started, out of desperation, started a business line that we since have shut it down, is to 3D scan people and make miniature versions of them. So sometimes people in Riyadh started contacting us. Well, it's going to take a lot of time and money to send someone with a scanner to scan someone there for something that's going to cost just under 1,000 riyals. It didn't make sense. So we started exploring to something called photogrammetry, is how do you take photographs, convert it into geometry. And we started playing with it, and we had a couple of success, but it wasn't like profitable or scalable. It just paid for whatever it is. So it wasn't really a good business. But when this came along, we were already training for about 2.5 years. Mm-hmm. So when push came to shove, we were able to deliver in 24 hours and delivered it to the hospital, and they executed and the guy survived. This was really surprising even to us.
That's no time. Within 24 hours, you manufactured the limb?
No, we 3D printed the skull of that person with the damage. So basically what the doctors did is they basically to restore the structure
facial
of his
structure,
face,
yeah.
They took titanium plates and used that as a template.
Got it.
To cut the titanium plates. So when he comes, they open, plug and play.
And it's there. Yeah.
So that's what they did. We've never done anything like this. We were scared as hell. We were so scared. It's like, I've never been put in a situation where someone's life Yes, I'm not the doctor, but I am helping the doctor.
Yeah.
So it was like I was one of the tools in the doctor's kit. So when that happened, I realized it. I was like, this is a gap in the market, the knowledge technology gap. So what happened is when I was talking to this investor company, and they said, Doctor, how do you think the business model should look like? So I sketched it to them and I walked out. And they called me 2 days later and said, can you come back? We would like to run this. Like, no way I'm going to run this. I told them there's no way. I wasn't that blunt, but I was very neutral in my answers. But in my head, I was like, no way. Because my experience with Dartech, my other company, it sucked 10 years out of my life. Because it was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. No education, no love, no marriage, no nothing compared to what I did in my first startup. Because when I started it, there was no incubators, there was no accelerators, there was no support for startups. You either did it on your own, or there was nothing.
You were bootstrapping?
And I was barefoot. It was before that metaphor even came out.
Wow.
It was very difficult. It was very difficult. It was like swimming upstream with 2 anchors on your legs and someone while raining and someone stepping on your foot. That's how difficult it was. So there was no way I'm starting another company. Forget it. And I went to my business partner. I said, no way.
It molded you to the person you're in today, though.
It's easier now to say, looking back, but it was, I nearly died.
But would you rather that you didn't go through it?
Looking back, I don't think I would have done it any other way. So I was very reluctant.
I sensed.
So when I did the pitch, they said, write us a pitch, do a business model, put a package together. I was so unprepared. I wanted to wing it. So they would say, no, we're not invest. I was so underprepared. I didn't even review my slides. And I pitched it and they loved it and they approved it. And they gave me exactly what I asked for. And I was like, oh, crap.
What is it? You make the best impression when you're not trying to make a good impression.
Yeah, it's like, it's funny how that works. When you're not trying, it works. And when you try,
yeah. You make an idiot out of yourself when you try.
Like, what did I get myself into? And when we started it and we started doing it, and I was so reluctant. Up until we started building the factory, all of the files related to HealTech was in my temp folder. I was like, any day I'm going to delete it. This project will die. I didn't tell anyone, but that's what I was doing. So
that's so funny.
And as we were starting, I was at a conference in Germany and I saw something very intriguing. I saw a helmet that can adjust the deformity in children who are born with deformity. And I loved it. I said, I really like that. I was like, can I get a sample? They're sort of like, nope, you got to get trained. There's a lot of liability that would be involved. You need to know what you're doing before you can sell this product. I said, okay, we'll get my people trained and I'll get trained too. So we had no idea where it's going to go. We completely have no idea. But I just really felt that this is something that could help some people.
But what does it do? Because I saw the video. It's something that infants put on when they sleep because of a complexity on one side of the head.
So sometimes, when babies are born, their head or their skull is like tectonic plates.
Okay.
They're completely separated. There are 4 different tectonic plates on the sides and 1 from the back, just so the baby can come out of the womb.
Okay.
Because they actually act really like tectonic plates where they overlap so the baby can come out. So sometimes when babies sleep on one side, it actually starts floating or flowing in one direction. It takes a conical shape of the head. Of course, it could get much more complicated. So what you're trying to do is remold the head during the first couple of months in order for you to reshape it before it actually closes and welds itself shut.
Okay, that's why it's soft on the top.
Correct.
Because it's still forming. Okay.
Yes, and that's why actually it has a hole on the top.
It does, yeah.
Because you don't want to add pressure where you want it to shut down.
Yeah.
So what we did is we actually had one of my friends who's a pediatric neurosurgeon, a very good old friend of mine. I've known him since the 90s. He's a very well-renowned doctor. He had a case. He said, Hashim, can you do it? I said, yes. And in my head, I was like, I have no idea how I'm going to do it. So we took it as a pilot project case.
Very, very brave of you to say.
I was scared as hell. I was so scared. And when we did it, I said, well, what is the worst that can do? I was like, the baby can die. I said, can the baby die? I was like, no, he can't die, but he's going to get deformed. So I was like, okay, how do I make sure that nothing happens to this baby? So I kept on call with the European company every week, scanning the baby so we can scan in progress, see how the helmet is doing. The way it works, if I can give an analogy, you know these molds that they create the watermelons into rectangles and heart shapes?
Yeah.
The same principle.
Okay.
You're really just trying to control the flow of growth. So it takes more of a spherical shape versus a conical shape. So it's like, this is let me approach it as a geometry problem. So what we were doing is we were doing progress scans, and then we scan 3D overlap the scans throughout the months. So we have the original, so we can see the direction of growth. Is it in the right direction? And we would consult with the doctor. And the doctor says everything's okay. He examines the baby, and to our shock, the baby improved from extremely severe to normal.
Game changer.
I was shocked that we were able to do that, and none of us had medical background. So then when we succeeded at that, and they said, no, I think we can help a lot of people. And this is how we continued moving forward and plowed forward. And now we are Saudi FDA approved. The factory is approved by the Saudi FDA, Ministry of Industry, and
Health as well, Ministry of Health involved.
Ministry of Health.
Yeah.
Yep. And
It's amazing. You never expected to go down this road in life.
I never expected to go to college, let alone start my businesses. Even when I started working, all I envisioned in my life is that I would be an employee, have financial security, and get married and grow a family and then die. That was what I had in mind. I was never ambitious to do, even when I was younger, trying to be a good designer. I was just to be an employee. I never starting a business was never in my forecast, not even in my dreams, or I never thought I could be one.
So what's the learnings here? What's the wisdom, al-hikmah, from what you have been through to the youngsters listening? What would you say to someone who really thinks that they will never amount to anything?
Take what people say about you with a grain of salt. And if you really want it really bad, whatever you want, you have to ask yourself a question: is the pain worth the gain? And if you don't know, read. And if you can't explain, write it down. And if you can't prove, build it. If no one can help you, figure it out. And people will believe you when you can build it. And if you just don't know, don't watch too much TV. You can't retain too much. Read, engage more senses. I'm telling you to read, and I'm dyslexic. So I really pushed myself to read. So this is one of the hardest lessons. When people don't believe you, show them. Yeah. Show them that it can be done. Stop the talk, because people can talk all day long. Very few can build. If you can build with your hands, whether it's physically or metaphorically, it'll make believers out of people. Even if they're doubters, even if they want to poke holes into it, it makes it harder for them when you can build it.
Yeah. I think in a room of 100 people in Saudi Arabia, I'll speak about us, 99% of them will be on social media and 1% will have a book in their hand.
Yeah.
I worry that it's that low.
It's because it's becoming a lost art. Because when you think about reading, and mind you, I never read until 2009. Up until 2000, I'd never read unless I had to for educational purposes or classes. But in 2009, everything changed for me, and I started reading. And I started reading heavily. And when I realized what reading does for you, it was like I'm missing out on a lot. So I went on overdrive. It was almost like a dopamine rush for me to read. And I was a horrible reader. I can't read. It took me, the first book that I read in 2009, it was a 260 or 255 pages. It took me 6 months to read it.
What book?
It's the Michael Jackson tapes. It was an interview with Michael Jackson. In 2009 is when he passed. And I really love Michael Jackson. I absolutely adore Michael Jackson.
Iconic.
His work ethics, his dedication to his craft.
It's the best.
And that's how, even when I give presentation, I don't call them presentations. I call them performances. Because I have to entertain and educate. I have to edutate you. So I have to keep you very interested, and I have to educate you at the same time. To do that, I really have to master my craft, and I have to be entertaining to people. And when I do my performances, every day after I'm done, I'm actually sweating, physically exhausted because I put it all in. It's just I took what Michael Jackson is doing on stage when he's performing into my craft. It's not a linear scaling, but it's a non-linear scaling because the platform and the audience are different. Every time I stand before an audience, the initial impression is that rejection. And I learned from stand-up comedians how to lose your audience and regain them. How do you connect with them? And I actually wrote an article about what can we learn about business from stand-up comedians? Because there is nothing more vulnerable for people to stand in front of complete strangers.
Make them laugh.
And make them laugh.
It's very tough art.
It's the toughest art. Actually, if you think about it, when you learn a new language, the last thing you learn is the sense of humor and comedy, because it's not about the jokes. It's about the references. It's about the connection. It's about the punchline. It's about the pauses. It's about the timing. It's a lot of art. It's about the bravery. It's about how when you lose an audience, how do you get them back? How do you make them connect with you? How do you tell a compelling story that makes them want to take the next step or take action? This is really hard. So to learn how to do that in business, that means you're on something right. You're doing something right.
It's amazing how seeing what Michael Jackson did is something that you take and incorporate into your line of work in terms of work ethic and all that. Not many people would have anticipated that coming from you, and he really, I don't think anyone ever worked as hard as he did.
He is one of the hardest working people I've ever met. And I used to, every time I used to buy, back when DVDs were a thing, every time I would buy it, I would always be focusing on the special features. I'd watch it before the main feature, because I want to see how did the magic happen? What happened behind the scenes?
Yeah.
Did you know that during a concert that takes about 2 hours long, that he lost about 6 to 8 pounds per show, that his waist size changed? So when he changed outfits from the first hour to the second hour, he has to change outfit because his size changed.
Water weight?
Water weight. That's how much dedication to the art he had. Wow. In 1996, he was standing on a platform in Germany and it fell. It actually failed and it dropped. He stayed to it and continued the performance, although he had sustained a back injury. But he kept at it, and he cut his hand. He started bleeding. He did not stop. He kept going. The show must go on.
He has a big heart. He had.
Yeah. He was dedicated.
Very
he was
dedicated.
When he was on stage, he really owned it. And that's what, when people ask me, when I'm standing in front of an audience, the bigger the audience, the more comfortable I am.
Wow.
And that's where I built it up. That's where I got my inspiration from. And this is the interesting part about inspiration. Inspiration sometimes comes from people you know as a person. Sometimes they could be people you look up to. Sometimes they could be fantasy people, imaginary people. I actually just wrote an article about what we can learn about perseverance, about how to become daring to be innovative, and what we can learn from the X-Men. Because the X-Men, each one of them has a mutation. This mutation could be translated into a skill or what makes you special, what makes you so different than other people. How is Wolverine the complete embodiment of a real entrepreneur who can heal from their wounds, who can learn from their mistakes, who they can grow and sustain life for many, many years? This is how my brain works. I see similarities in things that everyday mundane things, and I write it and see it in a different way. And this is how my brain works. And things that you might not think could be even turned into a story, I managed to actually turn it into a story. Because that's how our brain remembers things, is the sequence of events that happen. That's why stories, when they're told in abstract form, nobody remembers them. But when they're compelling, but what makes a story so interesting? How do you connect with people you've never met? How can you share an experience that you've went through, but convince people and make them feel or imagine as if it happened to them? This takes a lot of training and practice. And I like to say that I hate doing it, but when it's done, I like the impact.
Yeah.
I enjoy it.
How to make people empathetic towards something that you have been through and thus engaged with what you're saying.
And then relate it to themselves.
Yeah.
And how do you talk to an audience of over 100 people and everyone thinks as if you're talking to them? That's an art. That's not science.
Charisma plays a role as well, I think, when it comes to really getting people's attention.
Yeah.
And focusing on you, the subject. Do you gain more happiness, or are you happier writing your articles? And then I want to ask you about your articles, or from reading. Where are you most in your zone?
I have multiple zones, and one of the things that I do is when I want to fill my mind,
Yeah.
I read. When I want to empty my mind, I write or work out. And mostly I work out after at the break of dawn. It's about 6 o'clock. I start running, and that's when ideas start coming to me, because I'm rushing oxygen to my head, and it starts making connections in my head, and I'm thinking subconsciously about things and problems, and they always come to me in the morning. That's why I'm dedicated to working out. Although I'm not, too athletic, but at least in my mid-40s, I think I'm doing decent for a guy in his mid-40s. Yeah. But I'm dedicated, and I hate jogging. And one of the things I've learned in my life is that if you manage to have discipline and love what you hate, you can only imagine what you would do when you're doing what you love. So if you can have the discipline to do what you absolutely hate doing, you become unstoppable. Nobody can beat you. Nobody can beat you at your craft, because you're busy trying to beat yourself yesterday, not wasting your time trying to compete with Jack or Jill or Abdullah or Abdurrahman. You're focusing on yourself and focusing on your people. And this is what makes you unstoppable, in my opinion. So when I have a lot of thoughts. So when I empty and write, I feel as if it's a metaphorical bucket, and now I can start filling it in. When I get frustrated, I write. I feel that it diffuses my tension. And I started writing in COVID, publishing what I write in COVID. I used to summarize books and have it for my own self, but COVID changed everyone. Okay. So I started publishing my writings, and they were horrible. Oh, they were horrible. When I started reading what I wrote in 2020, I can't believe people wasted their time reading that crap. Oh, it was a bunch of crap. Oh, horrible. I could win a Razzie Award for the horrible writing. And I thought I was good at the time. But I've done it every day. Every day I write. I develop my own quotes. I write and I summarize, and I write my own articles. I summarize books, because I learned that when I do it every day, and I hate doing it, by the way, but I learned how to love what I hate. But it helped me when I'm in situations, especially difficult situations during crucial moments. I managed to connect the dots much faster. And I managed to see things that I could have never ever saw before. Because when you connect the dots every day and you write, you start normally sometimes in one point, but the pen takes you somewhere else. And it's a very interesting place, because it's not where you thought, but it's a better place. And that mimics reality. We don't always get what we want, but we get what we need. And normally when we want something in life, we want it so bad, and we get disappointed when we don't achieve it. We go on a tangent, whether it's a career, marriage, a job, whatever have you. But this other place, if we allow ourselves to stop being too stubborn for a minute, it's always better for us. Because there are higher powers that know what's best for us, even when we don't know what's best for ourselves.
Well said. I love that stint right there. Well said. That is some of the most motivational shit I've ever heard in my life. Writing and what it did for you sounds exactly what journaling does for people. Something I say every year I'm going to do. Let's not get into that. Would you say that the writing that you've done, and of course iteration 1 is going to be crap you should see actually no, don't see it. That with repetition, it was, I forgot who said it, I think it was Hormozy, who said, I will never compete with someone who has over 100 iterations in anything if I'm doing it for the first time. That guy will beat my ass, because he's done it over 100 times. And it's amazing what and Simon Sinek as well. Actually, there was a little micro segment of his that went on YouTube 2 days ago, of consistency being like the 8th wonder of the world. And it's amazing what you can do from that, just because you know what works, you know what doesn't, you know how to fine tune, you know how to cut, you know how to. But did you feel that it rewired your brain in some way?
Absolutely.
You think differently, you approach things differently?
especially during conflicts, during difficult times. How do I diffuse tension? How do I resolve problems? How do I manage crisis? It completely rewires your brain.
Personal as well?
Yeah, even as a personal. I started understanding my wife a little bit better. I started understanding and respecting what I can't understand. That's one of the hardest lessons I've ever learned in my life. How to respect what I don't understand. It's very, very difficult.
That's some high level human being level of being, whatever you want to call it.
And it came as part of my work. I didn't plan for it, but it's something because my team is like a diverse collection of people, and everybody's just different, not good or bad, just different. And trying to see how I can communicate with these people in things, and sometimes we would agree on things that I don't agree, but they would agree on, but I would disagree but commit.
Yeah.
That's not easy. And I had to do a lot of decisions that I did not like, but it ended up being better than I thought.
Yeah.
Because I gave it a chance, even though I did not like it from the outset. But I just gave it a chance. I let it breathe. I let it take form and shape. Because things sometimes in your head work in a certain way because of your background or your experience or your biases. But the world always changes and morphs into different things. And honestly, I'm so glad that we did some of the things I disagreed upon doing, because it ended up being really good for the company.
You became less stubborn?
A lot less stubborn, because life taught me that I have a lot of theories. Most of them are wrong. And I need to let feedback drive my decisions and motions. Even when I built my new factory, and this is how it affected my decisions. Our factory is about 1,500 square meters. There's 300 of square meter of unoccupied space. It's empty. And everybody would enter and it's like, why is this all this wasted space? I said, we've been in operation for about a year. I don't know where the market is going. So I let the market drive.
Definitely.
So I don't want to collect expensive paperweight. I need the machines to work 24 hours.
That's the business part of your brain thinking now, and not just your engineering.
Although I want to get all the toys. I want all the printers, all the machines, all the CNC machines, all the scanners. I want to get them because I'm a technical guy. Yeah. But I can't let that control, because it's not the best interest of the business. I can't. I'm held accountable. I'm the CTO. I have to report to a board. They trust my decision, but the role of a leader is something that you earn, not something that you're given. Manager is something that you're given. Leadership is at a different level. And for you to lead, one of the characteristics that you know that you've transitioned from a manager to a leader is that, will people follow you if they don't have the motivation to do what they do every day? Would people follow you if they did not get their salary? Would people follow you if there was a crisis? Would they do that or not? This is when you know that you have achieved a glimpse of leadership. And it's a responsibility and not a prestige. And it's the hardest job that you have to do, because you have to do very difficult decisions.
Absolutely. Under pressure.
You're constantly under pressure.
Mm-hmm. With deadlines.
But it's a role that I have to do, because it's in the best interest of the company, and I can bring the results that the company needs to deliver the impact it was designed to do.
You ever burn out?
Yes, I did. A couple of times. When I first started Dartech, it was in 2014. That's when I completely broke down. Mentally, physically, I lost so much weight. It was in denial for the longest time. It wasn't until I wanted to go to KAUST for my job. At the time I was doubling as KAUST and starting my company. I wear a tie to work every day. I stood in front of the mirror and I could not tie my tie. I forgot how to tie my tie. And it's something I've been doing every day. That's when I knew I completely burnt out.
That's scary.
Yeah, I know. I was shocked. I actually had to drive all the way to KAUST with my tie untied, and I had to go to the bathroom. And that's when I remembered. And that's when I knew I need to recalibrate. I need to recalibrate.
So what do you do differently now to ensure that, you rest is just as much of something that you're getting as you work?
I learned how to delegate.
Yeah, you hear that a lot. It's huge.
And it took a while for me to learn how to trust my team to delegate, because they will never do it the way I want to do it.
Yeah.
And that helped a lot. And then that built in them confidence. So they started taking a lot of the load off of me. So that was one of the key things that I've learned is how to delegate and when to delegate and to whom should I delegate. The other thing that I do is I make sure that I maximize the utilization of my time. Just because I want to do something doesn't mean that it's the best thing that I need to do right now. So prioritizing is something very key, because I've noticed in my team, because they're all young. When I say young, they're in their 30s and 20s. So to me, they're young.
Yeah, me too.
What I learned about them is that they don't process information the same way I do. So it took me a while to understand what's their sweet spot. Because I can't treat them all the same. Not in terms of fairness, but in terms of how do they want to receive information? How do they understand? How do they process information? Because that makes a very big difference in how they receive it and how they respond. Because if you treat this every way and delegate the same way, it might backfire. Because not everybody wants to receive the information the same way you do it for X, Y, or Z.
Yeah.
And that's something they don't teach you in business school.
No. Horses for courses, knowing that people have strengths and weaknesses, and to delegate accordingly is a challenge in its own. Leadership is hard.
It's the hardest thing. It's the hardest. And the tricky part is, how do you take a weakness and turn it into a strength?
Yeah.
By reposition it and realigning it with something else that the company needs, but it wasn't what it was initially assigned for. So that's also a little tricky.
Yeah. You have new goalposts now goalposts that are continuously moving.
And that's why I don't like to label things too much, because then it basically confines you. You become more biased or feel that you're defined, because the way you define a problem dictates how you solve it.
Yeah.
So the more you put walls around it or grab your arms around it, it becomes restrictive. You need to wrap your arms around it, but don't choke it. Let it breathe. See where it goes and follow and trust the process. This is something that is hard for people to understand. How do you trust something you can't see?
It's a harder sell. Any industries that you have your eyes on right now, thinking that, okay, that is something that, we need to get some skin in the game in, because it's going to be the next big thing?
Historical restoration.
Historical restoration.
Taking historical artifacts from physical form, turning them digital, because the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is rich with historical artifacts. I want Saudi Arabia to be, when you walk into any historical site or any touristic site, I want you to get the same feeling as when you get out of a Disney ride or a Universal ride, or when you go to the Eiffel Tower or you go to Big Ben. You find those gift shops that are not cheap products, but well designed and well executed products, made in Saudi, designed by Saudis, made for Saudis and tourists. That's where I want. I want to take some of the things that we have. We have a lot of heritage. We have a lot of history. I want to present it in the best way. I want to take it and tell a story. I want people to know the story that they have read in whatever language that they have, or in whatever folklore that they've heard. I want them to hear the real story told from the source. I want people to see the artifacts that are in Al-Ula, Mecca, Medina, Al-Jawf, Eastern Province. We have rich Al-Hassa. These
Don't forget the South.
In the South as well. You have so much beauty that is not presented in the way that the kingdom aspires to do. The kingdom has high aspirations. So what if we can take those physical forms and turn them into digital, so we can have we can have AI, we can have augmented reality, we have virtual reality, we can have virtual museums, we can have souvenirs, we can give presents to representatives of states of different countries. You are really putting it at a different level. So that's an industry I haven't gotten into. We've done a couple of hit and miss projects, a couple of ad hoc, but it's something
green space, right? It's
absolutely. And there are so many things, and you can have so many companies in Saudi dedicated just for souvenirs, because that doesn't exist yet.
It doesn't exist, and what an opportunity that is. And one thing I've noticed in my 40 years of existence is that tourists follow the story.
Yes. Everybody follows the story.
Follow the story. I think France is the number one most visited country in the world. I'm pretty sure I'm right with that. And then within France, obviously, it's Paris. Within Paris, it's Eiffel Tower. And people go to the Eiffel Tower to see the story of the tower.
I can give you a pebble. I can give you a pebble.
A pebble.
And you would look at it and you would not think much of it.
Yeah.
But when I tell you that that pebble actually came from the moon and it came on a spaceship with a Saudi astronaut who brought it, it gives a whole different value to that pebble.
Did they bring one back?
I don't know, but I'm just making it's a metaphorical story. But what I'm saying
like, can I see it?
but what I'm saying is that everything changes when there's a story behind it. Of
course.
An authentic story behind it. It changes everything.
I was ready to buy.
My metaphorical pebble.
If your metaphoric pebble was in on display at a museum X, and they're open between this and this, I would go and see it. I want to see what this looks like. I will follow the story.
Yeah.
And Hessa Sideri, who was on one of my favorite episodes, she is an archaeologist and she loves what she does. And I quote her, 80% of Saudi is undiscovered.
I believe that.
Isn't that nuts?
But that shows that there is so much that could be done.
So much that can be done.
So much potential.
Yeah. It's and I think, if you think about it, for the longest time, like Saudi was for us, we weren't really open to the world to come and visit. And now with what they're doing at Ministry of Tourism, it's just
amazing.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
And talk about being in its infancy. I think it's 5 years old, give or take. Imagine 10 years down the line when they are 15 years in existence, where we will be with their experience and expertise. It's if this is what we did in such short amount of time, Ministry of Sports as well, in such short amount of time, and here we are looking to host the FIFA World Cup, the biggest event on the planet.
Yeah, who would have thought?
Who would have thought? Sleeping giant, yeah, in every sense of the word.
I remember having a tour of Balad in Jeddah.
When?
It was in 2022.
Because it was run down for a long time.
I know.
And then they really buckled up. And
when I went there, I couldn't believe what I saw. And there was a tour guide, one of the best people I've seen, who has a good architectural background, engineer Talal Samargandi. He gave us a tour and he spent so much time explaining to us the design of the Hijazi door of a house, the intricacies. I was so captivated, and I don't know how to memorize. I picked up every single detail that he did and said, and I wrote it in an article and I sent it to him. He said, I have been doing this all my life. I've never looked at the Hijazi door the same way you represented it, because I took and I explained it physically and historically, but then I explained what the door stands metaphorically. It's a transition. It's the wrist of a house. I took it and took imagination and built it into the story. And he thought it was a really good piece. And he's been doing this for a while. And I'm not even a writer. I'm just a hustler who writes. But it's all about it. Let's not get caught up in how people define us, and let ourselves spread our wings, allow ourselves to make mistakes, be criticized by people. It's okay. And honestly, as I know this might sound weird, the best feedback I've gotten is from people who criticize me or try to put me down, because they tell it to you in your face, and you take it and then you come back better. You refine, you hone your art.
Take it personally.
A lot of people take it personally, and I decoupled feedback from person, and I took it for what it was, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna get better. I'm gonna be faster. I'm gonna be smarter. I'm gonna be more conniving. I will get it done, and it helps that I'm a little stubborn.
It's good though.
Most entrepreneurs that I know are stubborn and have a huge ego, but it's how they manage their ego. Ego, in my opinion, is like money. It's not good and it's not bad. It's all about how you use it and how you execute it. Because think about it. Here you are thinking that you're better than everyone who was before you. coming up with a business idea that nobody thought about, and you are the best thing since sliced cheese. This is what every entrepreneur subconsciously thinks about.
Yep.
I'm going to do something that no one else did. Oh, really? Are you that full of yourself? So that's where the ego comes in. And one of the reasons why I never gave up on Dartec is really a host of reasons, but one of the main reasons is that I did not want to fail. I didn't want people to come back and say, see, we told you were going to fail. We told you can't do it.
We were right about you.
We were right about you, and you were wrong. How are you talking about localizing the manufacturing of spare parts and you don't even have a factory? You're doing it with laser scanners. Nobody has ever done it before. So what?
Your
Show them.
Stubbornness paid off.
A lot, yeah. Because we created a new industry. The phrase reverse engineering was a dirty word back in the early 2010s and 11s. Now it's mentioned in every meeting that are talking about the strategy of localizing the manufacturing of mechanical spare parts. And the funny thing is, my name always shows up as the crazy doctor who started stuff like this. Now, whether it's in a good way or a bad way depends on who you're talking to. But my name always shows up because I was the only one who was talking about it back in 2011, 12, 13, 14, all the way up. And I pushed so hard for it. So hard. Did I invent it? Absolutely not. But I'm the way it was executed in Saudi. That's where the uniqueness is. Because innovation is not really coming up with something new. It's reconnecting the dots between things that new and exist in a different way for a different industry. And this is where cross-pollination comes in very handy. Sometimes you take people who are expert in one field, move them to a different field. You will find out that they can actually serve that field.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll just give you one very quick example.
It doesn't have to be quick.
When we receive spare parts, normally they're damaged, they're corroded, they're full of grease and no proper referencing, and end users give it to us and they give us the operating conditions. But we don't know, we can't capture it, it's always random. And there were mistakes when we were, this is not the right part, not the right feature, it doesn't fit. They were always, because the reference is wrong. So I thought, where is an area where you need to diagnose something that you receive very quickly and no room for mistakes in order for you to properly do your job? I went to the emergency rooms and hospitals. I looked at the forms that they use where they take your blood type, how to take your history real quick. It was 2 pages. I said, how can I do it in 1 page? So basically, I treat my part that I receive as a patient, and I need to diagnose it and take its medical history so I can produce it in a way where I can inspect it based on the operating conditions that are documented, so I can basically make sure that it fits. And a lot of companies in Saudi adopted it as one of their templates now. But it started by a crazy idea that has nothing to do with engineering from the emergency room.
Would you label or categorize yourself as a disruptor?
Yes, absolutely. And I make a lot of people nervous.
I don't like that the word disruptor has a negative connotation.
It does have a negative connotation because you make a lot of people who are in their comfort zone very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Because most people don't want to leave that comfort zone because because our brains work the same way. Our brains are lazy. They always want to reserve energy or preserve energy, so they want to always relax. So that's why we are people, we want to always relax. Yeah. So people who like the status quo, I'm the worst thing since knives.
Yeah.
A very, very bad news. Because when people claim they want to innovate, a lot of people claim they want to innovate, but when they see the price of innovation, they don't want to do it.
Yeah, they get scared.
Because in order for you to innovate, you need to reach the growth zone. To reach the growth zone, you need to pass through 3 phases. You exit the comfort zone to the fear zone. From the fear zone, you enter to the learning zone. From the learning zone, you end up with the creative zone. that's where you start creating magic. And most people are not willing to go through that process because it's a scary process, especially when you get to the inflection point between different phases. It's scary because you start questioning everything, your existence, who you are, why you do things. Very uncomfortable. And the internal dialogue that you have between yourself and your conscience is the scariest because it's not filtered and there are no politics. It's very scary when you question a lot of things that you've taken for granted or have accepted, and now it's proven to be incomplete. Let's not just say incomplete. That's scary. And that's why they call the initial phase the fear zone, because you fear what you cannot predict.
Yeah. And in the world that we live in today, we are, not that we're just easily distracted, myself included, we look for ways to be distracted. When I can't get into my car without having a podcast, an audiobook, I don't listen to songs anymore. I can't get into my car and not have something on. For goodness sake, I'll listen to Rogan in the shower. What am I escaping here? And Naval said, half of humanity's problems is that they can't sit in a room for half an hour in silence, basically meditate. If they could, it would solve half of their problems. Listen to your mind.
Because most people, in my opinion, they listen to their thoughts, but they don't talk to themselves. And you can learn a lot when you start talking to yourself, but you have to be focused. You start talking to yourself and asking yourself, why am I doing the things that I'm doing? What happens when a trigger happens? Why do I feel the way that I do? Am I feeling this because I'm supposed to, or I want to, or I don't know, or I'm not aware of something? One of the best books and underrated books that I read, that I summarized also, called Emotional Equations, because I'm a geek. So it breaks out all of the standard emotions and the complex layered emotions, and what are their contributing factors. So they take a complex emotion like workaholism, which I am, and they take it into an equation that is a numerator and a denominator, what you're running from and what are you living for. Very interesting, because every workaholic is running away from something. And every workaholic that I've ever met is living for something that is bigger than themselves. So it makes a whole lot of sense. Sometimes when we run away from things, we just don't want to face our fears because it scares us. It really scares us. And most of my life, I've tried to spend trying to escape or eliminate anxiety, depression, and fear. And I came to realize that I cannot get rid of them. I have to learn how to live with them, because we are always depressed of something, and it carries us like weights, and it gets heavier as we grow older. So how can I use that depression as fuel instead of weights? How can I take that and convert it from coal to diamonds? It takes a different way of thinking, a growth mindset to do that. And how do I take fear and use it as a motivator versus an inhibitor? And how do I take anxiety, my fear of what is the unknown, which is the scariest part, and not let it stop me? I can move forward even when I don't know where the destination is. Like example, if you think about a car that you're driving from Jeddah to Riyadh at night, you know where the destination is. All you can see is 5 or 6 meters ahead of you. And that's all you need to know, because you're going to run into detours, you're going to run into ditches, you're going to run into a lot of obstacles. But you have to know why you're doing this. Yeah. A lot of people focus on what they do. Some of them focus on how they do it, but very few focus on why they do it. Most people I've ever met in my life don't have a why statement. They don't know why they're doing what they're doing. They think they're doing the things that they do because that's what they're supposed to do. Well, we're supposed to do a lot of things, but why this and why you?
Such a profound question. If everyone can ask themselves one question, I would choose that. And not just what do you do on a professional level, what do you put in your body? Why do you have that burger twice a week? Why do you sleep 6 hours or 5 hours? Why do you smoke a cigarette?
Yeah.
It's a very, very profound question of why do you do ...
And it's a very Simple question, but a heavy question. You need to reflect very heavily, and you need to update it annually because it changes, it morphs. It's not constant. It's a snapshot in time. And I've learned through practice that I've changed and updated my why statement every year. And every time I'm down on my luck and I get depressed, I read my why statement. And that's what gets me. It doesn't work instantly. It takes a couple of tries. It reminds me why is this pain? Why am I tolerating this pain? Why am I doing things that I hate at work? I don't want to go and fight banks and lawyers, but I have to. I have to do this. They can't see what I see. I have to show them. I have to make them believers. And then even though they only look at numbers, how do I make them believers? How can I make them fight for something that they don't care about? Mm-hmm. How can I bridge the gap between what they know and what they don't know and what they care about and what they don't care about, and I make a link between them? How can I make someone who doesn't care? That's what makes my job a little difficult.
You, sir, are a high-level thinker, and you are inspiring me minute by minute. I could just listen to you all day. I forgot that I'm the one supposed to be asking the questions. I don't remember the last time I asked you a question. I mean, I'm just mesmerized here watching the way you operate. My goodness. Sheesh.
But this comes because I write a lot, I read a lot, and I practice a lot, and I make a lot of mistakes. There is more crap that is not published and crappy work than the good part. But it's because I'm persistent. Persistence and discipline and grit is really what I believe gets it done. I mean, you're talking to someone who's dyslexic, who does this every day. It's really mentally challenging for me to do this. It's mentally challenging for an ADHD to sit down for hours and do one thing without getting distracted with too many things. But it's the end goal that I like. Most people don't read my readings, by the way. They don't read any of my articles. Most people, I would tell you, maybe 80% of the people I communicate my articles to or send it to them, they don't read it.
What's the general subject of the articles that you do write?
Entrepreneurship, self-help, biographies, self-reflection, neuromarketing, sales, negotiation, things that I face in my daily life, things that I feel that I have an opinion on. It just helps me decompress my thoughts so I can find some room in my busy head of thoughts and ideas.
Can you choose your favorite 5 or whatever the number you want to be? And we'll put it in the description box in YouTube in the show notes.
Absolutely.
So people who are listening
Sure.
can have access to that. You say that most people don't, and I think that's a shame with how many times, how many iterations of your articles you've done and how much you obviously enjoy doing it. I know I want to read them. And I think it's something that people who are listening right now should have access to.
And the good thing about it is that it's also available as audio.
Okay, that's...
Because on Medium, if you have a membership on Medium, you can listen to it as an audio.
Yeah, fantastic.
And with the way I do it is I put in a lot of effort because when I summarize a book or write an article, it's not pure text.
Yeah.
I give mental breaks by putting images.
Yeah.
So I make sure that the images helps tell the story, because I have to tell a compelling story. It's not about barking information. How can I tell you an inspiration? Why did I write this article? What inspired me? Sometimes when I have some of my employees have a conflict, I use that as an entry point, because it's not about telling a rosy picture. It's about telling something that is real. Something that is real has good, bad, ugly, good people, bad people, a change of heart. Because what I try to do in any of my performances or any of my articles is really one thing. That's the punchline of what I want people to do, is to think differently. Mm-hmm. Give things that they don't understand a fair chance. Every topic that I ever presented or book that I've ever summarized, I never force the reader to arrive to a certain conclusion. I leave it open, and I respect the reader to make their own decision. So I leave it open, and all of my articles have takeaways. So basically people, they can pick and choose whatever they want, because just because I think it in a certain way doesn't mean it's right for them. And them not liking it doesn't make it wrong. It just makes it wrong for them. Yeah. So this is how I do it. And if I can make you change how you think, that means I'm helping I'm contributing to the fact that you're starting to look at things differently. That means you're going to perform at your work a little bit differently. And when I write these articles, it's really helping me exercise how to reconnect the neurons in my head so I can be a better performer at my job and I can serve my employees better.
Writing is everything.
And it's sad that not enough people in Saudi and in the Arab world write.
Right. And read as well. These two things can really turn your life around.
Yes, and
as you've seen.
And the only way you know it is to do it and try it.
Yeah. You'll get better at it, both the reading and the writing part.
And trust me, when I started reading comic books because I needed pictures. I don't like to read text.
Which comics?
Marvel and DC. Those are my favorite.
Spider-Man.
Comics. I like a lot of characters. My favorite Marvel character is Daredevil. The reason why I like him so much is because he has these inner demons and he always struggles trying to make the right decisions, and he's always having this internal conflict, which is something I face a lot. And in the DC universe, I love Batman because he has this darkness, but he channels it in a way. He takes pain and turns it into pleasure. Yeah. And this is something that we always struggle with. We always try to focus on pleasure, but then get shocked when it ends up in pain. So in the book Dopamine Nation, it tells you how to reverse that by seeking pleasure or abstinence from stimuli in order for you to get to pleasure. So pain and pleasure are two intertwined things that you need to redefine your relationship with. Okay. Because if you try to pursue pain like exercise, the pleasure behind it is worth it. You become healthier, you think better. Your brain is wired physically and ergonomically, wired differently. But you can only do that if you're willing to take the pain. Mm-hmm. So that's why pain and pleasure are always, it's like a yin-yang relationship. One cannot exist without the other, but it's where you start and where you end.
It's called Dopamine Pleasure?
Dopamine Nation.
Where did I get pleasure from? Okay.
And I'm actually working on summarizing it this week.
It's translated in Arabic as well?
Yep, because it's a very good book.
Oh, wow.
Very, very good book.
So you do a lot of this, huh? You read books that, ones that you really enjoyed, you then summarize it.
Yeah. And it got to the point where people see a book that they like and they say, oh, Hashim, can you pick up that book and read it and summarize it for us? We don't need to read it, just summarize it for us.
So like a 300-page book, roughly how many pages would the summary be?
3.
30? That's it?
That's it. 3 to 4. It used to be worse. It used to be 10.
Okay.
But the more I do it, the shorter it got.
This is fascinating.
It takes time. It takes practice.
You should sell this stuff. Honestly.
I do this for fun.
Yeah.
Right now, I have 196 publications since COVID.
196 summaries.
196 book summaries and articles.
Well, in the words of Joker, DC Comics, if you're good at something, never do it for free.
I just love and here's the interesting part. When some people see some of the articles, they call me in to give workshops about them.
Wow. Okay.
So but it's, I'm not advertising. I'm not marketing for it, but it has the high potential because if you see it, it might scare you of the amount of information that is out there that was in my head.
Yeah. I'm sure people would probably come across the summary and like it so much that they'd probably go and read the whole book.
A couple of them actually told me that they did.
Yeah.
They actually, and some of them actually told me, I actually got a lot of heat because of this. There was a book, a very interesting book. It was called Upstream. I gave a workshop on this book to actually 4 companies in Saudi. And the way I saw it, because the way you look at problem solving is either upstream or downstream. Downstream is like firefighting. Upstream is preventative. So I thought, who in the world of comic books does this? Superman is a firefighter. Something bad happens, Superman goes and saves the day. Batman lurks in the shadows, tries to prevent crime before it happens. So I used that as an analogy and I presented my workshop. So people went and bought the book and they were shocked that there was no Superman and Batman in the book. And they said, did you make it up? I said, yeah. They said, well, it's a little bit more interesting the way you did it.
Yeah.
I said, well, there's copyrights. That's why they didn't do it in the book.
You hooked them into it.
I imagine things in a different way, and I present it in my way. And some people told me, and it's really flattering. They say that my summaries or articles are sometimes better than the original book. And that's the ultimate compliment that I've received.
Yeah.
And it's like, how is that even possible? How can I take something that someone worked on so hard and then present it in a different way? And some people might find it a little bit more interesting.
That's amazing.
And what I do in my book summaries, I don't use any international references. That means I don't use examples, the Apple examples, the Google, I don't use any of that. I use all local examples because I want people to relate to my writing. I mean, we've heard enough of the Steve Jobs stories, the Elon Musk stories. We've heard enough of those. And what I've realized, when people read something and they feel that they cannot really relate to their own personal lives, they don't benefit from it.
True.
But if they feel that another Saudi who's, I don't want to say like them, but let's say closer to them than other people, there is a higher likelihood that this something, if not help them, would inspire them.
Yeah.
And if you did that, I mean, it's not bad.
You put people in a position to feel that they can relate to that person and thus want to hear more about him.
And how can that benefit them? And this is something I learned from my father. He told me at a very young age, he said, if you're not contributing to this life with something and helping people, you're hurting. You're wasting your time. And he said, don't you ever waste people's time. If you're not helping, if you're not contributing, there's no impact to what you're doing. You are wasting your time. And another thing that my mom told me is that when you learn something, that knowledge is a responsibility. It's not something that you flash to people and say, I am Dr. So-and-so, I have done this, I have accomplished it. Nobody cares about your accomplishments except your parents, maybe your siblings, possibly your wife. But no one cares about you in the outside world until you show them something that would help them.
True.
And this is where human-centered design comes into what we do. Everything we design, we put the center of our design is the user, and we design things around them.
That's reverse engineering.
That's where reverse engineering comes.
Yeah.
Is how do we take the need and orchestrate everything around it and then make it flow and build a story around it.
That's sales and marketing, discover the need and then find a way to produce it at scale. Work backwards.
Yeah. It's when I was little and I used to, before social media or the internet was ever invented, I used to eat cereal from cereal boxes. And what was on the back of cereal boxes? Mazes. So what I used to do as a little kid is I always used to start from the finish and work my way backward. And I never failed. Because every time I started from the start, I tried to get there. I would always hit the blocks and I would try to do it again. It didn't work. So I started feeling guilty. I was like, am I cheating by starting from the finish? Because I never go wrong when I start from the finish.
That's crazy.
I started reading the rules. I was a little kid. I was 5 years old, 6 years old, 7 years old.
And you weren't violating any rules.
I read about it. It doesn't say anywhere in the rules where to start. So what if I start from the end and work my way backward? And that's where I saw the moonwalk. The moonwalk gives people the illusion that you're moving forward, but you're actually moving backward. But it's far more impressive and a lot harder. And that's where the idea of reverse engineering started germinating in my head as a young kid without even knowing it. So when I learned about it in education, it clicked. I connected the dots. And you can only connect the dots looking backward. You can't do it looking forward. And to do that, you need to make a lot of mistakes. And that's how you learn. I've never seen anyone who learned much by not doing mistakes. The only thing that grows when you get everything right is your ego. Nothing else grows. And nobody cares about you if it doesn't benefit them.
Yeah. Sensing an ego or detecting an ego from someone is very off-putting to the person who's detecting it. It's not something people want to be around. It's ugly.
But unfortunately, it's something you have to deal with it sometimes when you have a client with a big ego. I've learned how to use it against them to get what I want.
Yeah.
It takes some time. But you learn how to inflate their ego, make them feel good, make them feel important, and take your idea and make it theirs. They will fight for it because they have a big ego. Now it's their idea. Who cares who takes the credit? I want to get the job done.
Yes.
That's how it works. And I learned that from emotional equations because it talks about narcissism. It talks about ego. It talks about envy. And I learned what are the other emotions, and I started playing with it.
There's a bit of reverse psychology there.
Yes.
Yeah.
But that's what you got to do.
Absolutely.
That's what you got to do, because
Absolutely.
you want to get the job done, and you want to do it ethically.
Yeah. Does the amount of tech available to our fingertips today, does it scare you? Is it too much?
No. I think what we're missing is how to connect it all together. Tech is out there. Knowledge is out there. Trained people are out there. How do we put it all together? Package it. It's all about packaging right now. Taking what's out there, package it, and repackage it, and represent it, repurpose it. And some people, unfortunately, think that it's all about the tech. Something I've learned very early in my career when I was in the States. And I heard this from two of my mentors. They said, never fall in love with technology, because it will stab you in the back. Technology is a means to an end. It's a tool. And when you're talking to people, never sell them the drill, sell them the whole. Show them what the satisfaction that when you focus on selling the whole instead of the drill. That means it doesn't matter what tools they use, so don't get caught up on that. But use the best tool for the job. But the next job might not need to use that tool, so you have to be open for that, something like that. So this is what I learned, and never to fall in love with technology.
It's limiting.
It's absolutely limiting in the sense that it doesn't broaden your horizon. And it becomes, when everything becomes a nail to you, and the only tool that you have is a hammer, you start treating everything as a nail.
Yeah.
So when the only tool you have in your toolbox is a hammer, everything becomes a nail, and that's dangerous. That's absolutely dangerous. And that's something I try to avoid. And if you ask me, what is my why statement? What does Hashim do? What I do is I take technology, leverage it to help solve chronic problems in the medical industry and in the healthcare industry and in the industrial sectors. I leverage the use of technology. I didn't say 3D printing, CNC, casting. It doesn't matter. It has to be broad.
Yeah.
So I pick the best tool for the right job.
CNC, we didn't get into that. What is that?
This is basically when you do a 3D scanning of a part. So if you have a physical part in physical form, I need to transfer it to the computer. I can use calipers or rulers, and I can copy this geometry and do it manually. Or I can use 3D scanning, either laser scanning or optical scanning, or something called CMM, contact measuring machine. So I basically have something that physically touches the part, copies the geometry into digital form. Once that's in digital form, I can design it so it can be reproduced. Now, when it's reproduced in the world of manufacturing, they have two different main ways of producing things, either subtractive manufacturing or additive manufacturing. Additive manufacturing is 3D printing.
Okay.
So it basically takes material and builds it layer by layer, different technologies. Subtractive manufacturing is you start with a block and you carve it out. You can do it manually using a lathe or a mill, or you can do it using a computer or a machine that relies on a computer. So it uses the computer as a background, as a blueprint to carve that machine based on a 3D CAD file, computer-aided design file. So that's what CNC stands for, computer numeric computing. So it uses the platform and then basically takes a block of material and then carves it without you manually doing it, within micron level accuracy.
How new is this tech?
In what sense?
How long has this been in the market?
Since the 70s.
Since the 70s?
Yeah. And there are so many of them in the kingdom. They are almost in every factory.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But here's the gap that we found in the market. Most people in Saudi don't have the engineering shop drawings. They don't have the reference of the assets that we own, not all of them. Because when you bring things from overseas and the warranty expires, nobody gives you drawings for these because they don't want you to be independent.
Yeah.
They want you to always rely on going back to them.
So there's a conflict of interest.
So what we need to do in Saudi is we have to develop the knowledge and technology of the things that we own. And this is the gap that we found in the market, is this know-how of our assets, so we can develop a digital warehouse of the parts and assets that we own, and then give it to local manufacturers, let them improve, build, expand. So when Dartic rises, the entire ecosystem of industry rises. We won't rise alone. the whole ecosystem rise. And when people know that you're there to help the entire ecosystem, right, everybody's going to support you. Everybody's going to help you. Who doesn't want their industry to grow? So I'm not entering into your territory. I'm actually helping you. And once people believe that, truly believe that, they will fight tooth and nail for you to succeed, because now you're not being selfish. You're there to help other people.
You are a benefit to person X.
And people care about themselves.
Yes.
And if you can give people before you ask, they will give you as part of reciprocity.
Absolutely.
It doesn't always work that way, but more often than none, it does work that way. And I have proof in running the business that a lot of people help us that way. They even give us lines of credit. They become more flexible with us because we're increasing their sales without them doing any effort. Yeah. And I'm giving it to them in an engineering way where they can make less mistakes. Mm-hmm. So I'm really bridging this knowledge gap using their equipment that is underutilized. Because when I've learned through experience is that most companies and factories in Saudi are owned by business people. They don't have a technical background, so they don't know how to build their factories. So what they do is they hire a consultant or an advisor to tell them how to build it. But this design of the factory, it's not that it's wrong, but supply is not tied with demand. So some of the equipment stays underutilized or never utilized. So when I understand how these equipment are there and what can they do, I know what kind of parts to get them. So I maximize the utilization of their assets. They fall in love with me. They say, how can we do more of that? Then you increase it. You add a production line. This is how the ecosystem should work. Every company feeds into the other. And you become like a huge shark with so many small fish around them. They will never attack them, but they need them.
Is that kind of like a circular economy?
It's kind of like a circular economy. And I've learned this from the Mittelstand principle in Germany. 80% of Mercedes that is produced in Germany is exported.
80?
80. They've learned how to make 20% of their core businesses done in Germany. 80% is done by small and medium enterprises. So basically the majority of the German industry is small and medium enterprise, not large conglomerates. And only 20% are the large conglomerate, the BMWs, the Mercedes, the Audis, that size. But the majority of the companies are small and medium enterprise. Mm-hmm. And when I visited some of these companies, because I visited these industrial parks, you'd find everyone just specialized in certain industry. And they're all next to each other and they feed into each other. I can do this, I can do that. I can do partially here, you complete that. And they're collaborating, true collaboration. Not mine and yours and territorial. That never works, never works.
Yeah. I think they really adopted a rising tide lifts all boats.
I agree.
That's Germany, at least the auto industry of Germany.
And it's a wonderful, wonderful model. But we cannot copy it identical over here. We have to modify it. It has to work for us. And to do that, we need to talk to each other. Mm-hmm. Yeah. We can't work in vacuums.
Yeah. More dialogue.
And it's not about who hits the finish line, who hits the punch line. Because if two companies succeed in a certain industry, the other fails, that doesn't mean the whole industry wins.
True.
We have to work more closely with each other. We have to be focusing. What drives our decisions should be the kingdom's vision, and everything should pour into it. Everything should be streamlined into the country's vision, not my company's vision. Of course, I have KPIs, I have financials, but when your goal is something bigger than yourself, much bigger than yourself, people will come and support you because nobody cares about you.
True.
The sooner you can realize that nobody cares about you, the more successful you'll be.
I think that's something that I want to instill in my kids and their generation from a young age. You got to put in the work.
There are no shortcuts.
Yeah, no.
And I think with social media and the way these influencers are coming out, it makes it look easier that all you have to do is just present something and you don't have to be the best person, and this is how you become important. This is where you get your value. And I don't know if I agree with it.
I also have concerns over how sheltered we live in Saudi. When I went to school in in England at the age of 11, boarding school, I was punched in the mouth with having to do my laundry, having to have to do my bed, being on my own, homework, all that. Over here, you're cradled. So there's something that needs to be said about, I think with our 6-year-old, at least, when he's done with his dinner, he washes his plate. And I think that's a small thing that kids, need to know, that you're not going to have people doing things for you for the rest of your life. So might as well do stuff for you from a younger age.
Yeah, I agree.
Make your bed, wash your dishes. And maybe even, I have him at least see the process that people go through in washing his clothes. Okay, this is the real world. Because in the real world, you're really on your own with these things.
Yeah.
And maybe that's a negative about the environment or the society or the culture we live in, is that we have people doing stuff for us.
And one of the things I also learned, and have you ever heard the phrase, the road to hell is paved with good intentions?
Good intentions, yeah.
I feel that people are trying to do the best for their children and unaware of the fact they're actually hurting them because they care about them too much. They want to help them. They want to provide for them. They want to pamper them. But what they don't realize is that they're actually hurting them. Yeah. They really are hurting them. I mean, I'll tell you, if my dad was not as hard as he was on me, while in parallel having my mom allowing me to vent and express myself, there will be never no Dartek, there will be no Heel Tech. Never.
Yeah. Wow.
So I owe a lot of what I am today to them. In the way how hard my dad was, hard as nails with me. He did not tolerate any BS with me. He was really, really tough on me.
I would have told you that, because you're not you without a sergeant, a drill sergeant in your life.
And I'm really glad that he was, because I didn't see it at the time. I thought he was just being hard on me for the sake of enjoyment. But I've learned that he really wanted me to be better than him. No one in the world ever wants me to be better than them except your father, as a man.
Absolutely.
And he really wanted to instill on me. I mean, I'll tell you a really quick story about my father. When I was in my teenage years, I wanted to buy a pager because that was the hottest thing since at the time. And I told him, my dad, I want you to buy me a pager. I was 11 years old or something. He said, why do you want a pager? He said, well, so when my friends want to call me, they can page me. He's like, what have you done in your life that is worthy of people finding you, that it's so important? And I looked at him and I was like, what is this guy talking about? I just want a pager. Why is he making a big deal out of it? He said, what have you contributed to this life in order for you to be sought after? He said, if you go through life thinking that people want you because to be social around you, I think you're looking at the world in a very wrong way. And he was hard. He never got my pager. But I've always learned that lesson. It's like, it's not about what I want. And it's not about who I know. It's who knows me. Who's going to call me at 2 o'clock in the morning so I can help them? That's the lesson I learned from my father. And it was such a difficult lesson, but it really helped me a lot. Really, really helped me a lot. To realize that you really need to do something with your life. Nobody owes you anything. If you go and have a steak, nobody owes you another steak. You need to pay for your way through life. And the easier it is for you to climb, the harder the fall. And when you fall, you will hit your face first. And it will reshape everything. And the scars that you go through will never go away. But they definitely shape the way you look at life. And they're all lessons learned that you have to grow with. So this is something I've learned very early in my life. I didn't realize it at the time, but I realized it when I reflected back on my younger years.
It's important to fall.
Very important to fall.
Because those are learning days.
Because it's all about how you get up.
Yeah.
How do you find the strength to get up when you have lost all hope?
And you don't grow from easy. You grow from, I know when I'm having a really, really difficult day or when life's kicking me in the ass, I'll take a second and I actually label that day as a growth day. We are learning today.
Sometimes you win, sometimes you learn.
Exactly. You never lose.
Yeah.
Wallah. And it's all about how you approach things.
It's in the mindset. It's all in the mindset and how you look at things, how you look at setbacks, how do you look at failure. I don't like to fail, but nobody does.
Yeah.
But take it for what it's worth, reshape it, learn from it. So you either waste your time that you failed or learn from your failure and become better tomorrow.
I feel like you'd enjoy Gary V's content. I don't know if you heard him growing up.
I've heard this.
And one of the main things that stuck with me from my conversation with him a few episodes ago is when he said that the moment you realize that everything is your fault, the happier you will be,
Yeah.
and the quicker you'll be at untangling whatever complexities you're dealing with in life. It is my fault. It's not my parents' fault. It's not my teacher. It's me. It's all me. Because the easiest thing to do is say that I couldn't or I can't or I won't because of this impediment.
Because of him, because of her, because of my situation, because of my education, because of my degrees.
Because it's raining.
Yeah.
Stop making excuses.
Go and get it done.
What is it? It's you're either making progress. I love this. You're either making progress or excuses.
Yes.
Making one of those two.
At any given point.
Dude, heavy. So I want to talk to you about teleportation.
Yeah.
With age, I started watching more sci-fi.
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually watching right now that has a bit of teleportation in it. Is that, it's not so close to what you do, but I think I'd like your opinion on this. Is that even physically possible?
I think so. Through wormholes.
Say
Black
more.
holes used to be a theory for a long time until they saw it. Just because you don't know it yet doesn't mean it's not out there. And I think if we discover how to go through wormholes, I think we could do teleportation. And the supply chain industry would have a hell day. And they find out you can teleport, you don't need to ship things. But I think it's theoretically possible. And even if it's wrong, I'd like to pursue it. Like even what Elon Musk is doing with trying to get to Mars, he might never get to Mars. But I don't care. That's not the point. It's what can we learn along the way in his pursuit to get to Mars. Because I remember when I was in college, I used to never understand why people went to the moon or space. I thought it was a complete waste of money. We have enough problems on Earth. Why are we wasting our time and money? I was working at the time in Ames, Iowa, at the Center of Non-Destructive Evaluation as a machine designer. And I went to my boss and he started talking about some Mars mission because I also helped contribute to the Mars rover design at Iowa State. One of the faculty was doing some research work and was doing it for NASA. So I was part of the design team who helped contribute to the Mars rover back in 2006. That went in 2006, but it was designed in 2004. So I was like, I did it, but it's a waste of time. He told me, did you know that for every $1 that the government spends on NASA or for space missions, it comes back in 12-fold for the aviation industry you benefit today? I said, I never looked at it that way. She said, because it's such high risk, high reward, very critical, very dangerous, that you learn so much along the way that it cascades backwards into civil aviation.
In Intel.
Technology, know-how. GPS started as technology for the military. Now it's ubiquitous. It's on your phone.
Yep.
But it started because of a necessity of a military, but it cascaded downwards to the civil aviation or the civil industry. And it helped us. It changed our lives. I can't imagine that at some days we used to go online and print directions, and even before that, open maps and highlight paths and hoping that you don't take a left turn in Albuquerque.
The worst one was giving directions on the phone.
Yeah, and where did you go to? Gas stations, because they know everywhere and how to get to everywhere.
Yeah.
That was your Google map.
Oh God, the world is. If Google Maps is the only thing that we can just appreciate the tech where we're at today, that's enough. Just Google Maps on its own, not YouTube, not anything else, just Google Maps.
And it's interesting to see where it started.
Yeah.
In an industry that we don't care about and we might not even see value in, but it cascades backwards. Correct. There's a ripple effect that happens because when we do and pursue these larger than life and very aggressive, very ambitious industries. Because when people tell me that, the sky's the limit, I feel that that's limiting. I feel that you should be limited by your imagination, because that takes you places that the sky might be a cap. Why don't you just imagine the world? I never imagined the business of reverse engineering ever taking shape. Now it's a business. And in the end of 2020, Sabic bought 30% shares of my company.
I know. Congratulations on that, by the way.
This was an idea in the head of myself and my business partner in 2009. This is legitimate. And there is nothing more that legitimizes you than being owned, 30% owned, by the second largest company in Saudi Arabia.
I'm so proud of you for that.
Well, thank you. But it was so funny because in 2013, Sabic approached me for a job, and I rejected it, although the salary was so enticing. But I rejected it.
Yeah.
And the head of recruitment, he's a very nice guy, very, very nice guy. He came to my office. He said, "Who rejects an offer from Sabic? Is it the salary? We'll give you more." I said, "It's not the salary." Because I had Dartic in my vision. I always had it since 2009, and this was in 2013. I said, his name is Dr. Atiyah. I said, "Dr. Atiyah, do you trust me?" I said, "I'm questioning your judgment, but go ahead." I said, "In a couple of years, I will serve you best from the outside."
Wow. And that you did.
And I stuck to it.
Wow.
I gunned it over, and it happened in 2020, December 9th, 2020.
7 years later?
Yep.
Was he still there?
Yeah. And he called me. He said, "I never thought you were good doing you crazy."
Poetic justice at its best.
But it's all about, it didn't happen at the time I thought, it didn't happen in the way I thought, but it happened. It happened. And this legitimized it's what we do.
I can serve you better from the outside.
And he thought I was crazy. He really thought I was crazy. He was like, "Hashim,
what are you talking about?" Yeah.
He said, "I hope you know what you're doing."
If you found that you inherited 100 million, something that you didn't have to work for, it just
fell out of the sky,
and it hit your desk.
Yes.
And it's yours, halal.
Yes.
This is yours. That's why I use the word inheritance.
Yeah.
How would you allocate it?
First thing I would do is pay any personal debt that I have. Second, I'll get my wife something really nice that she likes, and maybe a couple of things. I get my parents something that they would make them happy, and then I get things also for my sisters. Yeah. And then take whatever is left and invest it into my companies.
Into your companies?
Yeah. I don't think I would take anything for myself.
KAUST. You wouldn't look at, we touched on historical artifacts and how that's, an untapped industry in the country. Would you want to do something in that world?
Yeah. Definitely. I would invest in something, and I'll start something, and I'll push forward and hire a team to make that happen. Because the way I work is what I want to happen is that for the companies that I started, both Dartic and Heeltech and whatever comes along the way, is to survive me long after I'm gone. Because I need them to sustain and benefit the kingdom far after I'm gone. I want it to be a legacy, something that helps a lot of people, whether I'm around or not. That's very important to me. It's very, very important to me.
Were you always so long-term thinking with your approach?
Not really.
Delayed gratification?
Not really, no. I was always instant gratification. But things changed. Life changed, things changed, things happened. I've always been instant gratification kind of guy, and I think most kids are. But that changed. Life changes you, things that you see, things that you observe, things you experience. Because the difference between you today and 10 years from now are two things: the books you read and the people you meet. That's really it. And if you are in whatever position you're at and you want to become the best version of yourself in whatever profession that you're doing, you need four things. You need knowledge you need to learn, skills you need to acquire, contacts and affiliations you need to forge, and experience that you need to have under your belt. This is the difference, and this is what all mentors do. How to take these 4 attributes, fill them up for you so you can go from here to there. And the sooner you learn it, and the more time you put in it, in terms of discipline, hard work, grit, but nothing can stop you. Nothing can stop you.
Can I throw into that mix the people who you choose to surround yourself with?
Yes, absolutely, 100%.
You are the average of the 5 closest people to you.
I agree, 100%. That's why sometimes you unfortunately need to cut off some people. They don't like it. You might not like it at first, but it's in your best interest. But then again, how can you be the judge, executioner, and
Yeah.
It's a tricky decision that you need to make.
Did you feel that it was lonelier as you elevated?
It's always lonelier on the top.
Yeah.
Because you have no one to relate to. Nobody understands you. And actually, I was talking to one of my managers at my company. I told her, you know why leadership is so enticing, but nobody gets to stay there for too long? Because it's very lonely. I have a lot of lonely days. No one understands me. No one understands my pain, my struggles. Nobody understands it. So I can't talk to anyone. Yeah. So I talk to myself. I talk to myself a whole lot. I talk to imaginary people that I have in my imagination, my mentors, my imaginary mentors. When you read so much about a certain character that you admire, like Walt Disney, Malcolm X, whoever, Michael Jackson, Prince, you almost can imagine what they would say and how would they advise you in a certain situation. And that's what I do. These are my mentors. And then I have my real people that I aspire to, the people that inspire me, my mother, my father, my sisters, my wife, my in-laws. All of these people are around me. This is my support group. These are my fans.
Full trust
in what I do, and they believe in what I do, even sometimes when they don't understand it. But these are the things that keep you going. So surrounding yourself with people who believing in you, even when you lose faith in yourself, sometimes when you get these setbacks, it's very important for you to find the strength to keep going.
Oh, yeah. Yes. This was a heavy hitting and a profound conversation with you.
Thank you.
I don't think I've ever had a conversation with someone who throughout the episode were intertwining career and personal at the same time. Normally I go one thing first and then the second thing second. But the way you brought in, real life examples of your career and what that did to your happiness levels and what you learned from that and the tough days and how that molded you into the person you became is really, this episode stands out.
Thank you.
And you can go back and watch all the episodes. I don't say that often when we wrap up. So this was amazing. This was great. I'm so proud that we have people like you in Saudi. And I'll say one more thing. Honestly, Dr. Hashim, this platform was created to discover people like you.
And I'm glad I had this opportunity to speak with you. And I hope your audience enjoyed this and benefit from it.
They will. I'm sure they will. I started to know what their taste is like, and you very much are to their taste, because you bring a real human element to what it is you do, and I think it's going to resonate with them.
Thank you. And I tell people I'm kind of like sweet and sour sauce. I always have a little kick from it, so I'm not for everybody, but I just hope your audience enjoy it.
Certainly for me. Thank you very much, Dr. Hashim. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.